I'm Teresa.
And I'm Callista, and this is Culprit. And so today, thankfully, we are not going to talk about another show based on a book to complain about. But so that we thought we'd talk about The Lady, which I think it was on BritBox, and with Natalie Dormer. And what's the cute little main person's name who is also in Seven Dials?
It's Mia something. Yeah, she's adorable, and she's like 5 foot. She's like 5 foot or something, which we're both short, so I don't know. I always appreciate that a little bit, but
Yes, I'm 4'11". When anyone's even slightly around that, I feel so validated.
yeah, I hear you. And I was actually looking for her name, and I'm not sure why it doesn't immediately come up. Natalie, yes, we love Natalie. I wish she was in more stuff.
Yeah, I think when we first see her in The Tudors,
Yeah, boy, that was a while ago. Yeah.
it was good though.
It was good, and I was right, it's Mia. It's Mia McKenna Bruce.
Cute.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she's gonna be, they're doing, like, a Beatles biop, and I don't think there's a lot of people I've heard of, but I think she's in that. I don't know where I read that.
Oh,
I think it
that
might
should be
s
good.
Yeah. I try not to, peruse too much celebrity info, but that just happened to come up. I feel like she's having her moment, which go her.
Yes. Yeah, it does seem that a lot of actors and actresses, it's like they've probably been acting for a while, but like they've just been discovered and then they're in all the things at one time.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, strike while the iron's hot, right? I mean, how many people, do you really like? It's like, I mean, it's different than music, but, they're in a bunch of things and then, like, you never hear from them again, or they're in something, 8 years on or something. So, yeah, go her.
Yes. But yeah, as for The Lady, so we're like, many interested, not necessarily fans of the royal family. So we watched all The Crown. Obviously, that was amazing. But so anything like semi-adjacent, obviously the show is about she's Fergie's, Sarah Ferguson's. Is she her personal dresser? Is that the official title?
I think so.
Yeah, but I don't think this is a spoiler. This is how it opens. She's investigated as a suspect for killing her boyfriend, and it's about what led up to that, her relationship with Fergie, her past, and then it ends with obviously the verdict of the trial and like a little bit of a glimpse of what happens afterwards, although it doesn't obviously jump too much into the future.
Yeah, I wonder how much is based, everything. Obviously, any movies or it's not a documentary, any movie series are always how much creative license do they take? Um, I mean, she is definitely, there are definitely some anchor issues. She definitely has issues in the show. And just because we were throwing out that we like Natalie Dormer, I of course have to mention that the boyfriend that she kills is Jimmy from Downton Abbey, so kinda love that.
Yes, we got quite a bit of joy from that.
'Cause I think I'm a little bit more psychotic about that than you, but anytime I see, especially because it seems like British acting community seems, much smaller than, all the American actors that we generally see in things. I'm like, "Who is that? Why have I seen that person? What have I seen that person in?" So I always have to look at the cast, and then I always like when somebody was in something from years ago and then they're in something current. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, you have to know because otherwise it's just gonna niggle at your brain as you watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we probably mentioned that we're watching Pro. And boy, the actors that have gone on to, do all kinds of things and have become really famous that have kind of bit parts in the episode. There are so many of them. But yeah, but I liked The Lady. I think it was only like 4 episodes. Is that right?
Yeah, no, it was short, but yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I thought it was good. And we like, generally, not anything British, but, most things British, like you said, kind of, royal family adjacent, but yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely think I liked Sarah Ferguson more in the show. Obviously, now that everything's come out, don't like Sarah Ferguson at all in real life, but especially because she was played by Natalie Dormer.
Yeah, that definitely, that definitely had an impact. Yeah, and I am old, so I do remember they talk about, her having the affair Fergie having the affair with, I think he was like an American, hedge fund manager, financier, whatever you wanna say.
Mhm.
But the whole toe sucking thing, I actually remember that. I remember that being all over, I don't know, tabloids and pictures and yeah, not that I get like British publications, but I remember that it was a big deal. So anyways, it's just kind of, it's kind of nice when something is kind of based on a little bit of something that happened and again, creative license, but I thought it was good.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say you were old. I mean, I've definitely heard of the toe-sucking incident as well. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to ignore, but, yeah, obviously, we talked about, I forget, is her name what is it, Jane in the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Obviously, she's pretty problematic, quite clearly, and, if she, killed someone, but yeah, I mean, you did still kind of sympathize with some of the things she went through or some of the things she said she went through, and there was a little bit of, like, ambiguity around especially what she said happened in the lead up, and you're left to make up your own mind, which is always kind of nice, especially because something based on a real event, who really does know for sure that's probably the person who may not be in a position to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, that's true, and I mean, in real life and shows, I always like when there's kind of the I don't not the underdog, but, somebody who maybe doesn't grow up, wealthy or, going to let's see, it's the opposite in the UK, so not a posh school, but what is it, a public school is actually a private school here, is that right?
I think so.
Yeah, but, she grows up and she's not wealthy, doesn't come from, a big city or anything, and then she gets kind of this amazing job to work with Fergie, and then, of course, things go downhill, but, you kind of wanna root for her in the beginning, like, "Look, she's getting her chance," kinda thing.
Yeah.
Anything else you have to say about it?
So
Alrighty, well, I guess we should get into the episode. Today's case took place almost 30 years ago and is much closer to us, taking place in the second most populous city in Washington, Spokane. Spokane is not currently known for being particularly diverse, and this was even more so in the 1990s when this crime took place. At that time, 93% of Spokane's inhabitants were white and less than 2% were black. This conservative leaning town is where the DiBartolo family made their home. Tom and Patty had been married for 19 years and have 5 children. From the outside looking in, and isn't that always the case?
too true.
The DiBartolos seemed happy, but that wasn't the whole story. Tom was a serial cheater. He had numerous affairs throughout their marriage, often juggling his time between several different women.
1, lovely. 2, that sounds like far more energy than it's worth.
It sure does. Patty was tired of the continued cheating and wanted to end the marriage. Tom wasn't so sure. A divorce would be costly. 4 of his children lived at home, and child support would take more than half of his salary. In happier times, the couple would sometimes walk at Lincoln Park in the South Hill area. South Hill is an eclectic, historical, and highly sought after area with tree lined streets and homes dating back to the early 1900s. Patty had agreed to several walks in the park with her philandering husband in the fall of 1996, though she told her oldest daughter, Michelle, that the walks were awkward. They didn't really talk about anything, and she was confused by his insistence. Maybe attempting to keep things cordial, and since they were still living in the same house, Patty again agreed to a walk on the evening of November 2nd, around 8:30 p.m. At this time of night, it would have been dark for more than 4 hours and cold. There were several inches of snow on the ground, and the temperatures were near freezing. Not ideal weather, but Tom was persistent. After a pretty short walk, weather reports said that there was an ice storm on the way. Tom and Patty were standing at their minivan getting ready to leave when they were accosted by 2 black men who threatened them and asked for money.
Not liking Tom's response, one of the men reached into the open passenger door, opened the glove box, pulled out the gun inside, and shot Patty in the head. Tom, a deputy with the Spokane County Sheriff's Office, attempted to wrestle the gun away from the man and was shot in the abdomen. He was able to slide the back door open and grab his service clock and fire several shots at the retreating would be robbers. Wounded, but with adrenaline coursing through him, Tom lifted his gravely injured wife and put her in the back of the van. Even though cell phones weren't common, Tom luckily had one and called 911 on the way to Sacred Heart Hospital, telling the dispatcher that he and his wife had been walking in Lincoln Park and had been attacked by two black men. They were both shot and his wife wasn't doing well. They arrived at the hospital at 9:30 p.m. Tom was treated for the superficial wound to his abdomen and would be fine. Patty wasn't so fortunate. She had no pulse when she arrived at the hospital. Doctors tried to revive her, but her head wound was too extensive. Dr. Stephen Panaskovich believed that she had been dead for 30 to 45 minutes before reaching the hospital, which is odd since the drive from the park to the hospital is less than 10 minutes. Police rushed the hospital within minutes of hearing the 911 call. Officer Sherry Malinak was the first officer to arrive. She noted that Tom was crying hysterically and, between sobs, said that he and his wife had been shot. She gathered his clothing as evidence and obtained descriptions of the attackers. Other officers arrived quickly and conducted an initial interview. Tom was moved to a private room on the fourth floor at about 3:30 a.m. Nurse Judy Edmonds was one of the nurses assigned to Tom, responsible for monitoring his condition throughout the night. At about 5 a.m., she went to check on her patient, but stopped short when she saw a blonde woman lying across his bed, kissing him. Judy left the room.
Hospital staff had been told for security reasons to not give out Tom's room number, though he had requested a phone be brought to his room around 4:15 a.m. so that he could call his family. He told Judy that he was especially concerned about his youngest child, 9-year-old Lindsay, and how she would take her mother's death. Nurses Kim Stimfel and Ruth Knight both helped treat Tom, and other than the flesh wound, there were no marks, burns, or bruises on his hands, which there should have been if he was fighting for his life and attempting to disarm someone who was trying to shoot him. Patty was born on March 12, 1957, in Great Falls, Montana. She moved with her family to Spokane when she was 7 and would live the rest of her life in this Eastern Washington enclave. She was working as a loan officer with Telco Credit Union at the time of her death. Patty's murder left a gaping hole in the life of her family, friends, and coworkers, especially her children, who ranged in age from 9 to 20. Sons Nicholas and Jonathan, and daughters Michelle, Katrina, and Lindsay. She also had 2 granddaughters. The autopsy confirmed that Patty was killed from a single gunshot wound. Pathologists confirmed that the type of gun used was not consistent with a Glock handgun, which was Tom's service weapon. A volunteer with the Explorer Scouts, a now defunct program with Scouting America, found a slug embedded in a tree near the crime scene, which matched the Glock, seemingly confirming that Tom had fired several shots at the 2 assailants.
Patty was well loved in her community, evident in the more than 500 mourners that attended her funeral at St. Thomas More Catholic Church. Her colleagues were distraught. The credit union was small and tight-knit, and they didn't know how to grieve this senseless tragedy. Her boss, Tom Doherty, said, "When people were down, she was always up." Large photographs of Patty were placed at the front of the church, with her smiling face shining from each photo. Tom moved about the funeral stiffly, still recovering from his injury. He chose not to deliver his wife's eulogy, but asked his boss, Sheriff John Goldman, to speak during the service. He did muster the strength to stand up at the end of the funeral to say a few words. He thanked family and friends for helping out after Patty's death, saying that Patty had given him the greatest gift, herself and 5 beautiful children, and that he would continue to raise their children as she would want. He went on to tell law enforcement that were present to go home and hug their wife and kids, and to reach out and grab life because it can be gone in a flash. With a final flourish, he bent down, kissing the closed casket. Unsurprisingly, this was a huge story locally. Law enforcement were determined to find the criminals that had shot a colleague and murdered his wife. Unlike a lot of cases we hear about, the sheriff's office and the police department immediately began working together to find the culprits of this heinous act. Tom was questioned and gave as much information as he could about the men that shot him and Patty. Though
he was a little sketchy on specific details. He had been through a horrendously traumatic event and couldn't be expected to remember everything. I mean, he told his colleagues that they were Black. Wasn't that enough information?
If that described less than 2% of the population, I guess it narrowed it down, although I'd expect him to give the old racist, they all look the same chestnut when pressed.
I think he thought some general description would be enough for them to not look too closely at him.
Good point.
He was wrong. It was not enough information. A few days later, police again talked to Tom to clear up inconsistencies in his first statement from the night of the murder. He initially said he and Patty were approached by two Black men demanding money as they were in the park walking towards their van. In the second interview, he said they were standing at the van getting ready to leave when they were approached by the two men wearing dark athletic wear, standing on the passenger side of the van. The men threatened the DiBartolos and, in what defies reason, opened the passenger door, quickly opening the glove box, hoping to find cash or some other valuables, I guess, but instead finding Patty's gun that Tom had given her for protection. One of the men shot Patty in the back of the head, and then while Tom valiantly tried to grab the gun away from him, was shot in the stomach. He was able to open the sliding door of the van, grab the gun that was conveniently in the back, and fire several shots at the bad men. Tom said that the two shots were fired while the passenger door was open. However, the outside of the door sustained a bullet hole, which was only possible if the door was closed. In the melee, he didn't notice Patty's wounded body until after he shot the two men. Blood-stained evidence at the scene suggested that Patty's body was close to the sliding door, and it would have been impossible for Tom not to know she was there.
Officers were able to track down Curtis Jones, who fit the description of the person Tom said shot him and Patty. Though he was just a person of interest, he was taken to the precinct for questioning, then released. It seems he wasn't the person they were looking for. A sketch artist who had sat down with Tom shortly after the murder said she got a weird vibe from him and felt like he wasn't telling the truth. In a dubious decision, she took it upon herself to make small changes to the sketch, intentionally drawing different features from what Tom described. When she showed him the finished sketch of the perpetrators, he told her it looked 95% accurate. Police Chief Terry Mangan withheld the sketch and the description of the alleged assailant's race. Using his discretion and in an attempt to not ignite racial tensions, the sketch was provided to local law enforcement, but the suspected race of the individuals that shot the DiBartolos was not released to the public. Chief Mangan was well aware of the consequences of too quickly blasting the race of potential suspects to the public. He said, there was the possibility of unfairly focusing negative attention on a minority person, of creating an unnecessary polarization of a racial nature in the community. Front of mind were the cases of Charles Stewart in Boston and Susan Smith in Union, South Carolina. In 1989, Charles Stewart, who was white, shot his pregnant wife in the head and then shot himself in the stomach. Sound familiar? He told police that a Black man had committed the crime, and in that racially charged city, police immediately went public with information that they were looking for a Black man. They focused all their attention on sweeping through every predominantly Black neighborhood and arrested an innocent man before Charles, feeling the walls closing in, parked his car on Tobin Bridge and jumped into the Mystic River. Tensions between police and the African American community continued to be strained long after Charles's body was pulled from the river. Black citizens, rightly, erupted into outrage after the suicide, and race relations became even more fractured.
5 years later, Susan Smith, who was also white, went on national television pleading for the return of her two young sons. Susan said she was carjacked by a Black man and forced out of her car while her two young children, ages 14 months and 3 years, were strapped into their car seats in the back seat. The nation was shocked and angry, wondering what had the world come to. Investigators, facing pressure locally and nationally, sowed fear in the Black community, rounding up any Black male that remotely resembled Susan's description. 9 days after saying she had been carjacked, She confessed to rolling her car into the John D. Long Lake with the boys inside. The case again strained race relations with law enforcement, having no problem jumping the gun and squarely placing the blame on a fictitious black man. Unfortunately, society is way too comfortable placing the blame on black men. Just like blaming immigrants for violent crime, especially crimes against women, when statistics clearly show that white males commit crimes at an alarmingly higher rate. Though crimes are committed by strangers, the majority of crimes are carried out by someone known to the victim.
It's almost like there are people in positions of power who are trying to pin all the ills of society on a racial minority, and that mindset is then exploited by those with malicious intent.
It's exactly like that. Police had immediately been skeptical of the story Tom presented to them. They had looked for the suspects described, but that turned out to be a dead end. Police were aware of Tom's various affairs throughout his marriage and that they showed no signs of stopping now that he was the sole parent of his children. Being there and supporting his children wasn't very high on his list of priorities. With his wife dead and no job to go to, he had been placed on paid leave. Tom was able to fill his time however he wanted. The main way he chose to while away the hours was to spend time with affair partner number one. On November 15th, police contacted Larry Elk, who lived across the street from said mistress, Christine Ritchie, also the same woman who Nurse Edmonds saw draped across Tom's lap the night his wife was murdered. Police asked if they could place a video camera in an upstairs bedroom facing Christine's house. Larry volunteered that he knew people in law enforcement and was more than happy to help. The hours of footage showed Tom visiting Christine all hours of the day and night.
The Spokesman Review newspaper interviewed Tom on December 17th, an opportunity he used to say that he spent his days talking to his kids about their mother, delivering presents to the needy, and waiting for her killer to be found.
Such a stand up guy.
I believe it. When asked how his family was coping with the upcoming holidays, he said that they were struggling to come to terms with the death of Patty, and it is worse than you can expect. As far as the hole in this house, I won't ever get over the issue. I just hope to get used to it.
It's odd phrasing. Maybe tragedy would have been a better word to use rather than issue.
Or loss, I don't know, just something to make it seem like he cared. At the time of the interview, he was not named as a suspect, but he also hadn't been cleared. Regarding gossip that he was involved in his wife's murder, he said, I'm not about to give it any weight. I take the sting and move on. It's not true, so there's no reason even to speculate. Between banging his mistress, supporting his kids, and delivering presents to the less fortunate, Tom was busy blowing up the detective's phone lines. He called numerous times to check on the status of the case, lament that they hadn't found the perpetrators, and angrily question why he hadn't been cleared as a suspect. By not clearing him, they were causing him great stress and also financial problems because the insurance company wouldn't pay death benefits until that happened. But to his chagrin, he was advised that they were still working on the case and couldn't rule him out. He heatedly told them that, I really need to get this done. I need to be cleared.
Unfortunately for Tom, his wish would not be granted. He was arrested on January 29, 1997, after an intensive investigation. Detectives laid out their case in an 8-page affidavit, which showed a pattern of lying. He had been lying from the beginning of the investigation. He denied any marital discord, contrary to family and friends who said that the marriage had been on the rocks for a while, and Patty had mentioned to several people that she wanted a divorce. Detectives found that Tom had lied about extramarital affairs. He was hooking up with at least 2 women at the time of Patty's murder. He told detectives he was trying to get the gun away from one of the assailants and grabbed it just before he was shot, and that the gun was upside down or sideways at the time it was fired. However, the wound indicated the gun was right side up when it went off.
And given that he's a police officer, I feel like he should have had a basic understanding of ballistics.
I mean, you would hope so. Additionally, as medical staff noted, there were no burn or scorch marks on his hands, which was inconsistent with his telling of events. Family members told detectives it was unlikely that Tom would have left his gun in the car. He was known to carry his gun everywhere, from the grocery store to daytime walks through Riverfront Park. The murder took place in a dark, isolated park during late evening hours, which seemed more than sus.
It sure does.
Regarding the rush to the hospital, Tom said he drove at high speeds while talking to 911. However, an audio analysis of the call indicated no background noises associated with the fast moving car, such as the sounds of passing vehicles, wind, or engine noise. Investigators drove the same route and determined that a vehicle speed would have had to be maintained at 40 miles per hour to coincide with the length of the call. Detectives believe Tom made the call while at the park, stalling and making sure Patty was dead.
Tom was isolated from the rest of the jail population and remained under suicide watch. He had made threats of suicide in the past when confronted with extreme emotional issues. Police said they were concerned that he may try to intimidate witnesses if he was released. The affidavit stated that he has made veiled threats about knowing where to dispose of bodies and evidence of those who oppose him where they will never be found. He was ordered to be held without bail. The arraignment and bond hearing was a divided affair for family and friends of the DiBartolos. While Tom's brother and sister, along with some longtime friends, attended to show their support, on the other side of the courtroom sat Patty's family and her two oldest children. In a heart-wrenching show of strength, 17-year-old Nick, overcome with emotion and choking back sobs, told the judge that he believed his father was guilty. He said that he feared that he would come after him if he was released from jail. He pleaded with Superior Court Judge Neil Q. Riley to keep his father in jail until his trial. Nick's oldest sister, Michelle, and Patty's sister, Bobby Jean Harrison, echoed Nick's sentiments. "There's no doubt in my mind Tom is guilty of murdering my sister," Bobby told Judge Riley. "I've known Tom for 20 years. He's a master of intimidation. I'm very frightened of him." Judge Riley ruled that he would have to raise $250,000 in cash to bail out of jail. Tom remained in jail for a little less than a month before the issue of bail was revisited.
Tom's attorney, Marian Marino, during the bond reduction hearing, told Judge Riley that her client was not the dangerous ogre he had been described as. Judge Riley decided to cut the bail figure in half and allow Tom to put up his medical lake home as collateral. The judge did put several conditions on the release. He was to reside only at his home, not leave the house between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., not drink alcohol. Not sure how they're supposed to monitor all this, but anyway, not drink alcohol, possess firearms, or break any laws. Additionally, he was to have no contact with his two eldest children or any other witnesses in the case. This included any of the women he had affairs with during his marriage. Tom had been suspended without pay, and an internal investigation into his conduct was launched shortly after his arrest in January. On April 3rd, Sheriff Goldman provided him with a list of allegations and gave him 4 days to respond to the charges before he was fired. Attorney Marino advised him not to respond, and Sheriff Goldman fired Tom on April 18th. Not sure why he received more than the 4 days. The investigation uncovered some disturbing behavior. Tom verbally harassed and made inappropriate sexual advances towards a coworker's wife while in uniform and on duty. He had sex on the job a lot. He had an ongoing affair with a woman from 1982 to 1985. Some of the sexual liaisons occurred while he was in uniform and on duty. He had sex while in uniform, but off duty at the art bingo hall.
So, overall, impeccable behavior that should have made any citizen feel confident in his role as an officer of the law.
I mean, he obviously felt he was above the law.
Obviously.
He used his badge and alpha attitude to pick up women and then took them for unauthorized drives in his patrol car. And he returned several times to the scene of his wife's death after being ordered not to. The sheriff, pulling no punches, concluded that the evidence leads me to believe that you have been deceitful, untruthful, incompetent, dishonest, and demonstrated disgraceful and immoral conduct and have caused injury to public service.
Predictably, rules didn't apply to Tom because he quickly violated the court order by continuing his relationship with Christine, who was a potential prosecution witness.
Apparently, he really couldn't quit her.
Oh, I'm sure it's a mark of his deep, abiding love. A few weeks after agreeing as part of his release on bail to have no contact with Christine, they resumed their relationship. Christine, while being questioned by the police, acknowledged that she and Tom knowingly violated the no contact order. Feeling rather confident, she told officers that he accepted the risk because she was worth it. Undercover detectives had been watching Tom since the time he had been released on bail. They had received a tip from an auto dealership that they had seen the couple switching cars and parking them away from heavy traffic areas. They noticed the odd behavior, and they also noticed Tom from his starring role in the Spokesman Review. After learning that a warrant had been issued for his arrest, he turned himself in. Judge Riley described Tom's conduct as blatant and done in complete disregard for the conditions he had placed on his release. This wasn't a one time violation, but a continued and intentional disregard for the restrictions placed by the court. Tom remained in jail until his trial. Judge Riley initially ordered that the first day of jury selection be conducted in a closed hearing, a rare occurrence in Spokane County. However, he changed his mind, deciding that potential jurors would be interviewed in open court, but he still intended to shield them as much as possible, indicating that they would be referred to by numbers rather than names, and ordered that no pictures be taken during questioning. Attorney Moreno had requested the trial be moved out of Spokane County, saying excessive publicity had made a fair trial impossible. This wasn't granted.
Before the criminal trial began, Michelle filed a wrongful death suit. Acting as the personal representative of her mother's estate, she sought damages on behalf of her four younger siblings: Jonathan, 12, Lindsay, 10, Nicholas, 18, and Katrina, 15. The suit accused Tom of negligently, carelessly, and recklessly causing the death of his wife of 19 years, and said that he should compensate his children for a variety of emotional and monetary losses. He agreed to pay his children $1 million in damages, and it's not clear where this money was to come from. The trial finally began on October 20th, 1997. Prosecutors set out to prove that Tom had planned and executed his wife for money and the freedom to juggle various women without the constraints of a wife. In his eyes, divorce wasn't an option. Child support would take a huge chunk of his income. But if Patty was dead, he would make money as opposed to losing it. There was a life insurance policy, as there should be when children are involved. The death benefit was $50,000, but unsurprisingly, there was a double indemnity clause that would double the benefit in the case of an accidental death. And I know we have mentioned the complete absurdity of the existence of these stupid double indemnity clauses in the past. I mean, to a certain type of callous beneficiary, it makes a person worth much more dead than alive.
Uh-huh.
So, I just don't get it. So, with Patty dead, Tom would receive $100,000, which is about $210,000 in 2026 money. Tom said he didn't find out about the double indemnity clause until December. However, because he is full of bullshit and zero class, a family friend testified that Tom volunteered this information at Patty's funeral. Christine testified that Tom often complained that he would have to pay a huge portion. It's like a broken record here. He would have to pay a huge portion of his paycheck to Patty for child support if they divorced. She also testified that he had planned to reverse his vasectomy so they could marry and have children because, supporting his offspring seemed to be a high priority of his.
Yeah, more than likely he's just telling her what she wants to hear. How else would the prick be stringing along multiple women?
I mean, definitely. She also testified that they had sex the night of the funeral. Their relationship began in early 1995, and she was surprised when prosecutor James Sweetser asked her if she knew that he was having affairs with other women. I mean, she thought she was the only one.
Tom told her the marriage would end soon, that Patty was going to take the kids and move to another house that weekend. Attorney Sweetser asked what weekend Tom was referring to, and Christine replied, the weekend of November 2nd. Tom knew that time was running out for him to get rid of Patty. He had already done several trial runs to the park. Once Patty moved out, his shot at getting her to the park and killing her according to his plan would be gone. Lori Jacobson, another one of Tom's girlfriends, testified that she had met Tom in 1985 and they had an on again, off again affair through December 1996. Joanne Walker testified that she was a neighbor of the DiBartolos and that they had met in 1987 but didn't start having sex until 1993. Attorney Moreno, not winning any feminist favor, tried arguing that since Tom had a wife that took care of the home and the kids and he was able to have long-standing affairs, why would he want a divorce when he could basically do as he pleased while he was married?
I mean, I know defense attorneys' jobs are to work with the often little redeemable qualities of their clients, but damn,
I mean, for some of them, their mantra has to be think of the money, think of the money.
true.
Attorney Moreno pressed hard to have Sam McNeil testify that he had driven across town with two black men the night of the murder and that they spoke about a killing. One man told the other, "You didn't have to kill the bitch." She was trying hard to build the narrative that her client was innocent and other suspects existed. Police determined Sam's statement was unreliable. Judge Riley said that court rules prohibit testimony from a witness about another person's statement. That is clearly hearsay and is not permitted, he ruled. Attorney Sweetser relayed that detectives spent weeks investigating other leads and other suspects, but they found a string of frequently changing stories and other clues pointing to Tom as the real killer.
Prosecutors set up a life size two dimensional model of the van to show jurors that the murder didn't happen the way Tom had described. Blood evidence near the rear passenger hubcap, along with a bullet hole in the passenger door of the van, didn't square with Tom's account of what happened. He again said the door was open when his wife was shot and he was wounded. However, the bullet hole on the outside of the door, along with blood splatter evidence, countered this. Attorney Marino decided not to make an opening statement until after the prosecution had presented their case. She confirmed the obvious, telling the juror that he would never win Husband of the Year, and acknowledged that he began cheating on Patty during their first year of marriage. But he wasn't stupid enough to murder his wife. She said he had an easy marriage and nothing to gain by killing her. She accused police investigators of tunnel vision, deciding he was the killer the morning after Patty's murder. Tom took the stand after her opening statement, and after lobbing softball questions at her client, it was the prosecution's turn to question the defendant. Tom liked to be in control, and no matter how much his attorney attempted to prepare him for cross examination, Tom bristled under questioning from prosecutor Larry Steinmetz. When asked why a trained law enforcement officer and someone who usually carried his handgun everywhere would not have his pistol in the park the night of the murder, he said that he simply forgot to grab it and left it in the van.
Not adding to his believability, when Attorney Steinmetz asked the defendant more than a dozen times why he no longer remembered details about the night of the murder, Tom either replied, "I do not know, sir," or, when pressed on the contradictions between his testimony and previous statements by witnesses, he said, "I don't recall making that statement that way." Attorney Steinmetz, getting fed up, suggested that children avoid answering unpleasant questions by repeatedly saying, "I don't know." After asking Tom whether that was what was happening on the witness stand, he tartly retorted that if he remembered what happened, he would certainly say it. When he was able to reach back into his memory bank with several responses, Attorney Steinmetz sarcastically replied, "Mr. DiBartolo, is your memory working better now?" The 8-man, 4-woman jury deliberated for 2.5 days before finding Tom DiBartolo guilty of first-degree murder. Jurors said they paid little attention to the extramarital affairs in reaching their verdict. The motive they arrived at was that Tom knew Patty was moving out. The timing was critical. If he didn't kill her then, he might not have another chance. Prosecutors asked for an exceptional sentence, hoping to establish the precedent of extra prison time for any law enforcement officer who commits a serious crime. Attorney Sweetser argued that Tom deserved more than the standard range of 20 to 26 years behind bars because law enforcement officers are held to a higher standard. But after more than an hour of tearful appeals for and against leniency, Judge Riley said he had no legal basis to sentence Tom to a longer prison term than the law allows. Though he did say that he was a disgrace to law enforcement and deserved longer than 26 years for murdering his wife.
Tom was sentenced to 26 years with the possibility of release after serving 20 years with good behavior. Nick and Michelle testified at the sentencing that their father deserved to serve 50 years in prison. Expectedly, Ella DiBartolo, Tom's mother, swore her son was an innocent man, claiming that her son had been railroaded by sheriff's detectives and a mean spirited media, leaving him in jail and her with a tainted name. She went on to blame law enforcement and the media for painting him as a monster. She alleged that the investigators did little to find the two black men that shot her son and his wife. And I found it really odd that she couldn't even use Patty's name, who had been her daughter in law for almost 20 years.
I'll go out on a limb and say she's probably like other mothers of killers who see their sons as the center of the world. So Patty was simply an extension of Tom, and her name and identity was irrelevant.
That's gross. These,
Yep.
these mothers of boys need to be better. Finally, she said that after he was arrested, other inmates shouted obscenities at him. Her poor Tommy. I wonder if she could hear the smallest violin playing.
I mean, it seems like she was the one playing it.
Sheriff Goldman said the guilty verdict delivered a message that needed to be heard loud and clear, that police officers get their authority from the law and the people, and no one, including police officers, are above the law. Sheriff Goldman and Police Chief Mangan praised the unique and exceptional teamwork between their two law enforcement agencies. The two departments and the prosecutor's office worked closely to make sure the investigation was as impartial as possible. Sheriff Goldman went on to say that this was a very serious and very difficult matter to solve. It wasn't just that a deputy was involved, but that a lot of people in his department knew Patty and knew the kids. He said that most law enforcement officers were immediately skeptical of Tom's explanation of what happened at Lincoln Park, saying they investigated every lead, but every single lead turned out to be unfounded. There were no other suspects. In a lot of cases, it seems that law enforcement puts minimal effort into doing their jobs. I think in this case, they did an exceptional job. There was interdepartmental teamwork, sharing resources, leaving no stone unturned, and then having the forethought not to name the race of the supposed suspect. They were on the ball.
They really were. Kudos to them. On February 12th, 1998, the man who Tom hoped to pin his wife's murder on was found dead. 19-year-old Curtis Jones was shot in what police called a gang-related slaying. He was known to deal drugs and had several charges pending against him. Officers questioned Curtis the day after Patty was killed because he fit the description Tom gave of one of the robbers. But police quickly eliminated him as a suspect. Attorney Moreno said the death may help her client if he should win a new trial on appeal, because a number of witnesses she had planned to call during the trial refused to testify due to being afraid of Curtis since he was known to carry a gun and was viewed as a dangerous person.
I mean, that's rich coming from her, almost like she's describing Tom.
Freudian slip, anyone? Another gang member, Louis Gray III, was eventually arrested in 2005 in Los Angeles and pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter for chasing and shooting Curtis in the back. He was sentenced to 5 years.
Which doesn't seem like nearly enough time. Gang member or not, he still killed someone,
Yeah, as far as I know, that affiliation doesn't serve as a mitigating factor.
right?
In February 2009, not going quietly into that good night, Tom started a letter writing campaign to various local officials as he fights for his freedom. He was almost halfway through his 26-year sentence, which he had been serving at a prison in Rhode Island for his safety as a former law enforcement officer behind bars. But the distance didn't prevent him from corresponding with local officials. His continued correspondence to a Spokane judge resulted in him being declared indigent, leading to free legal counsel. He also attempted to appeal his conviction to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, claiming ineffective counsel, juror misconduct, and false evidence as part of his grounds for an appeal. The request for appeal was denied. Finally, he wrote a letter to then Spokane County Sheriff Ozzie Nezovich, asking him to reopen the murder investigation. Sheriff Nezovich declined his request.
Tom cried that he was innocent at every turn and exhausted each and every appeal at his disposal. No points for guessing correctly that in most of his appeals he acted as his own attorney.
They just can't help themselves.
I mean, they really are the smartest people in the room.
Yeah.
In 2019, he was transferred to a work release program in Yakima, Washington before his scheduled release. Upon his release, he was required to go into community custody for a minimum of 2 years, where he would pinky swear promise not to break any laws and have regular contact with his probation officer. Tom was released from prison on February 11, 2020, at the age of 65. Public records show he is living in Spokane. It's unfortunate he didn't serve his whole sentence.
That it is.
I know as a whole, killers are narcissistic and believe they are smarter, like I said, than everyone else. And I am sure this was exacerbated by his chosen profession, but I just couldn't wrap my head around the story Tom spun about someone reaching into the glove box and lo and behold, finding a gun and shooting Patty in the head. I mean, that's quite the escalation. It's worse than the one-armed fugitive narrative.
I mean, the whole thing is far-fetched, but I guess he really thought they'd take a deputy's account at face value and only do a cursory investigation. Thankfully, he was wrong. Just a quick note before we end today. We're going out of town to visit family, so we'll be releasing the next episode 1 week late, but we'll be back on May 31st with the case of Alexandre Despaliers. All the sources we used for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case for us to discuss, you can email us at culpritpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at culpritthepod on Instagram and at culpritpodcast on TikTok. Feel free to leave us a comment, rating, or review to let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you soon.